Hey, everybody. Neil deGrasse Tyson here. I've got with me Brian Greene, theoretical physicist, Columbia University. And the two of us, we're just going to riff on Oppenheimer, the man, and especially Oppenheimer, the movie. Just for your eavesdropping on our conversation. So, Brian, I trust you've seen the film?
I have.
You know, I Barbieheimered, by the way. I don't want
Oh,
to.
you did? I did not do that.
Why not?
Couldn't bear it. Sorry, but I should see it.
Yeah, that's seeing both movies on the same day is to Barbie.
Yeah. No, I guess that opportunity then has passed. And it is true, and I can go back.
So I've met Christopher Nolan previously. We've had him as a guest on Star Talk after one of his sort of time warping sort of movies that he had produced, and a very smart guy, very clever, with a lot of attention to detail. And my sense of the film was that it captured so much of what he cares about. He cares about science. He cares about culture. He cares about entertainment. He cares about all of this. And every little physics tidbitty fact that I knew from that era, he managed to capture, not with an entire off-ramp, just to put in a fact that you know should be there. He managed to fully stitch it and weave it so that I felt like I was sitting on Oppenheimer's shoulder watching all of this unfold before me.
Yeah, no, I definitely had a similar feeling about it. I mean, there were certainly moments when there were things on screen that I suspect most people wouldn't take much note of, such as the Einstein and Gödel, who would famously go for walks together. I mean, there were the wonderful moments when I was just sitting there feeling like, or Feynman playing the bongos.
Yes, because Feynman is not ID'd in the movie. He's the person playing Feynman is credited at the end, but the word Feynman doesn't come out of anybody's mouth. And so you have to pay attention in that party scene. He's playing the bongos, and it was Feynman in the car, because in one of his memoirs, he described the fact that he knew that ordinary glass is a very significant UV absorber. And so while they're slathering each other with, zinc oxide for the explosion, he's in the car and he says, "No, I don't need that. I've got the windshield. It's a heavy absorber of UV." And then they have that was Feynman in the car. And then,
I didn't know.
Yeah. And then someone else says, "Well, but what will protect you from the windshield?" So that was a good rebuttal. So those were two Feynman. So somebody had to know that little tidbit about Feynman and then put it in seamlessly. And that's not even someone where they make a big deal of for his presence.
That's what was beautiful about it. It wasn't like hitting you over the head with it. Like, here's this obscure fact that only we,
let's just in on the bongos, right? No.
Exactly. Yeah. The only moment that gave me pause, and I don't know if you had the similar feeling or not. I mean, you and I both spent time giving people a sense of the wonder of the cosmos and things like that. But the first handful of minutes of the film, which kind of tried to go into the mind of a physicist, swirling galaxies and these equations and what, it just sort of felt like that felt a little much to me. I don't know if it hit you that way at all.
Yeah, so I think without that, Oppenheimer is really just a manager. We don't see him manifest much physics knowledge throughout. He's managing the expertise of others. So that basically established his street cred, especially since his most cited paper is not about normal physics. It's about the universe and black holes, right? Which really didn't have much to do with this film. It didn't have much to do with his leadership in this role.
I mean, yeah.
So I thought that was okay. Otherwise, you won't get to do that elsewhere.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it all worked, but for the first few minutes, I was wondering where this was going. But yeah, I love the way that the historical facts were blended with, I guess, things that were well motivated, but, Oppenheimer's own personal perspective on what was happening versus the things that are in the public record.
Yeah, in fact, it was definitely his POV, no doubt about it.
Yep.
So what I liked about it was all of the angst people had about the bomb in a military setting against the Germans, but then against the Japanese, and the Jewish science in Germany. They toss bones to each of these without actually taking off ramps, because the off ramp would be, well, we're a historical documentary, we have to fully cover it. No, you don't. It's just his point of view. So, but they got it all in there. For example, they talked about, well, how special is this bomb? We just firebombed Tokyo and killed 100,000 people with conventional incendiary bombs. And your estimates are not even that high. So how could you carry some guilt with this when we've already committed that level of violence against non-combatant civilians? So that came up. And then there was what is this with Germany, Hitler, and the Jews? How is that going to play out? And my favorite line there, which I think encapsulates a lot of historical dimension, where they say, Heisenberg might know this, because will we get it? Heisenberg is brilliant. Will we get it before Heisenberg? No, because he's Jewish, and Hitler doesn't give Jews access to the labs. It relegates them to pencil and pads. And so that was a fascinating indictment of Nazi racism, basically, and how that very fact probably contributed to their, however slow they were on the development of the bomb.
On Monday, April 8th, the Great North American Eclipse will pass over the United States with only 0.5% of the world's population falling within its path of totality. Yep, that's just 0.5% of the world that'll be able to witness this reverential experience in its entirety. And guess what? Our friends in Little Rock, Arkansas are smack dab in the middle of it. If you're looking for one of the best places to view this year's eclipse, look no further than Little Rock. They still have hotels available to fit every budget. Witness complete and total darkness on April 8th and take part in Little Rock's special events and celebrations leading up to the big day, starting on April 6th. From outdoor adventures like hiking, biking, and paddling, to educational activities like visiting the Clinton Presidential Library or the Museum of Discovery. Little Rock's got a little something for everyone. To book your visit and witness this monumental event in person, head over to littlerock.com/eclipse. That's littlerock.com/eclipse.
Paid for with a combination of state funds and private Heart of Arkansas Association funds.
Now, the other thing, though, I wonder your thought on this. I was very impressed with how the carnage was treated. I thought it was a very dramatic moment. No spoiler here, when the sound went off and you had this moment before the actual explosion, and then you don't really see the carnage in any gory, explicit way. But then I began to think about that, and I watched The Day After Trinity. I think that's the name of the documentary. And I began to think, for so many young people, this may be their only direct connection to the events that happened at the end of World War II. Maybe there needed to be more of the shocking visuals in order that the generation really understood.
They described them. They did describe them. They said person with a striped shirt, where the dark stripes were, it burned their skin, and where the light stripes were, it didn't. There were other people where their shadows were burned into the exterior of their shadow was burned into the pavement.
I wonder if that's enough, though. Especially if it's the only
yeah. Okay. Yeah. So because war, sometimes you have to see it up close to know that you should never do it.
And this is a certain kind of violence to humanity that is of a scale and of a sort that is so spectacularly agonizing and awful, and to not fully feel that even momentarily, maybe a bit of a loss.
What about the scene where we're inside his head and he's about to talk about the success of the bomb to the assembled people, and he sees flashes and people's skin burning off? Yeah, that's in his head. It's not the documentary of what happened in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, but
it was also relatively brief.
It was brief, yes.
So yes, I mean, it's a difficult decision to make, because as a film, I thought it worked spectacularly as a work of art about this incredibly destructive moment and this incredibly destructive period. But again, it's not a documentary, but it may be treated as a documentary.
Yeah, our movies are our sources of historical knowledge for sure.
Yeah.
A few other things that I noticed that he did was we used to say Hiroshima, and then later people started saying Hiroshima. In the movie, it's said both ways. In two different cases, that has to be on purpose. Just so he's got both bases covered. He's got both covered.
Yeah.
Also, generally, when I see a movie a second time, I hear the soundtrack more because I'm not distracted by having to pay attention to the plot. In Oppenheimer, I already knew what was happening, so I was able to hear the soundtrack, and the moments leading up to the bomb test with the button, there is cacophonous orchestral music, and the editing pace is fast, and the music is getting louder and louder and more cacophonous, and you're not going to know that because you're anticipating what's about to happen. And if you're not aware of the music, which good music in a movie, you're not aware of it, it's just managing your emotions. When they hit the button and you see the explosion, the silence is deafening because they take away the music. And of course, there's the sound delay from the explosion to where they are. So he doubles up on the silence, right?
Yeah, no, that was beautiful. That was really beautiful.
And so they were what, 1-2 miles away? Sound will go a mile every 6 seconds. So the blast wave moving at the speed of sound, I think that calculation looked right to me.
Yeah, right. Sort of 8-10 seconds or whatever it was.
Yeah. Well, they were a few miles. Yeah, that's right. But between 1 and 2 miles away would do that. And they trusted their calculations. Why did they give so much weight to the risk of igniting the atmosphere? It seems to me that probability would have been so low, to be astronomically low, but it makes a really good headline. Oh my gosh, we could have ended the world.
And it's astronomically low probability for ending the world. It does demand a certain degree of attention.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I didn't mean to. Thank you. I agree.
You know, it was a real worry, and people had to sit down and do the calculation. Look, we had the same thing at the Large Hadron Collider. People worry that you turn on the accelerator, create a little black hole that would swallow up Switzerland and then the rest of Europe.
Did you see that YouTube video of a security camera in the parking lot of the Large Hadron Collider? And there's a countdown clock that went to 0, and then everything just got up. It was sad and hilarious at the same time.
But the serious point is, it's a real concern. And you've got to sit down and do the calculation, and colleagues of mine did the calculation and showed that it wasn't something that we should worry about.
Highly unlikely, yes.
Spectacularly unlikely that you could put it to the side, but this is what we should always do, because, ending the world's kind of a big deal. So.
But what reaction, I mean, when I think of you're splitting uranium-235, it sends out to neutrons, hits other nearby uranium atoms. Why would that ignite the atmosphere? What would happen? What nuclear process in the oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere were they thinking would happen?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know the details of the mechanism that was most concerning to the scientists of the time, but you were creating temperatures and densities of energy that we had never created before on Earth. And so you've got to ask yourself, is there any collateral process that this may spark? And the answer is, in principle, yes. In practice, no. And that's what you need to do to ensure that these things are safe. Do you know that some of the primary work on the process that you just described, where U-235 splits and neutrons are sent out, happened in the building where I'm sitting right now? At QP at Columbia University, had Leo Szilard, who is one of the first people. In fact, the story goes, I believe, that he was crossing the street in 1933 in London, just after the discovery of the neutron by James Chadwick in 1932.
And then it hit him.
And it hit him.
In fact, in Cosmos, we went to that very same street corner.
Oh, you did?
Yes,
Is that right?
yes, we did. And I walked up to the street corner, and I had no such epiphany. Personally, I'm anachronistically in time and place, but we did go to that moment.
That's
right.
Exactly. But then Szilard came to Columbia. He was working here in this building. Fermi was in this building. They were on different floors, each trying to determine whether you would generate multiple neutrons from these dissociations, because if you could get multiple neutrons, they then could have the cascading effect.
Yeah. The chain reaction. That's what chain reaction gained currency as a term back then. So are you in Pupin Hall? I'm in
right now, yeah.
In Pupin Hall. That's where I got my PhD from top floors. With the astronomers on the top floors, by the way.
Yeah, but it was then that Szilard and Wigner, when they realized this was a real possibility, they get in a car and they drive to Long Island, I think it's in 1939, to convince Einstein to write the letter that they talk about in Oppenheimer.
Yes.
When Einstein writes to Roosevelt saying, hey, we got to get a move on, there's a real potential for
because
a
it's
weapon.
possible at all. Yeah. I also heard that Oppenheimer did not have a one-on-one meeting with Einstein, but they had corresponded. And so what they did was because we knew Einstein is always wandering and alone or in conversation one-on-one, they created a conversation that would have been plausible expression of what their correspondence was. So I didn't have a problem with it.
That I don't know of.
I'd heard that. So, but I was okay with that, just because. Yeah. Why not? You get 3 for 1 there. You get Oppenheimer in conversation with Albert Einstein and the Institute for Advanced Study.
The ingredients are all right.
Yeah.
So, in a creative way.
One thing I tweeted this again. I'll give him a hall pass, Christopher Nolan. So July 16th is the test. That's summertime, and at the latitude on Earth where this occurred, at 5:30 in the morning, we are well into morning twilight.
Right. It was dark.
It would not have been pitch dark. But if you want a spectacular explosion against a dark sky, I'd give him the dark sky.
I've been there. I've been to where you probably have too, where they did the test.
Yes.
Yeah, because in a NOVA program, they had me take a Geiger counter and actually, you get some click, click, click. I mean, there's still some residual impact involved.
But wait a minute. Wait. So now you have the evidence of your current sterility. It's like you haven't had a kid in a few years.
What the problem is?
So I thought it was 2 movies. There was The Making of the Bomb and then The Trial. And it's quite a challenge to keep that going, after you have, the largest explosion Earth had ever seen. I think the wisdom that Einstein, it was revealed that he shared with him at the end was, in the end, whatever they're doing to you now, in the end, they're going to have to thank you. And basically that's where the movie went.
But it's an interesting question. I mean, I don't really face it directly in my own work, but my kids asked me, would you have gone and worked on the Manhattan Project if you were around at the time? And, it's a tough question, but I suspect I would have gotten caught up in the same kind of fervor, because when you see what was happening at Los Alamos, and the movie does a really good job of this, you realize that these scientists they're caught up in this ocean of excitement to do something that no one has ever done.
New science.
Yeah.
With government money to back it. Right.
Yeah. And I don't know if you've seen this, but Freeman Dyson, there's a quote of his. It's in this documentary, Day After Trinity. He says something like, the feeling of power. So that sense of you are grabbing hold of the universe and you now are using its most powerful forces to shape reality. It's hard not to get caught up in that.
Right.
Would you have gone?
So it's hindsight is very, or I have much more confidence in hindsight than at the time. So I'm a little conflicted for the following reason. My father was in the service, okay, at the time, and the Army was segregated. It was a segregated Army. It wasn't become desegregated until later. And so who am I really defending, right? Who's my enemy?
Yeah.
This was a very real thing, mixed with the lynchings in the South so maybe I would have joined because I didn't want Hitler to take over, because no matter what's going on here, we all agree Hitler was bad. But once we learned that Hitler was about to be defeated, to turn it on Japan, I don't know if I had an exit point, it would have been there.
Yeah.
If I had
totally. Because, Leo Szilard, one of the things that he was advocating, and, it's sort of a travesty that we didn't do it, explode the first bomb in an uninhabited place, demonstrate the power of this atomic weapon, and that should be enough to cause any enemy combatant to say, okay, we give up, don't drop that thing on us. And yet that's not what we did.
Right. Well, plus we only had 2 of them. Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
right.
To get uranium-235, that's not the natural state of uranium in the ground.
Sure.
Right. I mean, so you have to centrifuge it. And I keep thinking, in a centrifuge, do they liquefy the uranium? They have to have some
other details. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, anything else about the film that struck you?
Well, I thought they caught well the achievement, which is sort of odd to say because so many people died because of the achievement. But think about this abstract idea that these little things called atoms have neutrons that might spit out a few that would break apart other atoms. I mean, it's such an abstract idea. The idea of harnessing that within a decade to actually do something, to me, is an unfathomable scientific achievement. Let me put the horror to the side. And I thought they captured that really well.
So in my world, okay, you may not know this, but the uranium, the element, was discovered shortly after planet Uranus was named. Okay, so they wanted to sort of, they knew the elements should have a deeper, more cosmically inspired nomenclature than other. So uranium is named after the planet Uranus. Okay.
Don't tell me plutonium is.
I'm getting it. You just back it up. Okay. And then we discovered planet Neptune, and shortly after, element number 93 was discovered. That was named Neptunium. In 1930, the object formerly known as a planet Pluto was discovered, and in 1940, element 94 was discovered, and in tradition and in that sequence, it was named after Pluto, plutonium. My point is, we discovered plutonium in 1940, and it is weaponized and tested 5 years later.
Yeah.
Within 5 years. This is an extraordinary machine that has been put into place.
Yes.
And
crazy.
We knew uranium was fissible. So we didn't have to test that bomb.
Yeah.
The plutonium was a new element. So many people don't know that the bomb that was tested was a plutonium bomb, not a uranium bomb.
Yeah. But even, the fissile nature of uranium was only established in the mid to late 30s.
Okay. Well, it's an eternity given you're fighting a whole war with battleships.
Yeah, but it's again, look, I mean, as a theorist who just plays with equations, I stand in awe of anybody who can actually do something. And the fact that these theorists came together with the experimenters under the rubric of the organization that Oppenheimer put into place, the audacity of the goal,
Yeah.
and the fact that he was able to manage it and bring it to a successful and horrific conclusion, it's just, to me.
But do you think a half a dozen people could have done that? I mean, consider that it's a juggernaut, right? We are purifying the uranium. We have Hanford up in Washington, and we have all these sites separating the bits and pieces, and they're all coming together, kind of pay or play, with or without Oppenheimer. We're making a bomb. I don't know how singular Oppenheimer was to that project. He's made singular, of course, in the film.
Yeah. I mean, it feels singular to me because the organization that's required to bring together the theory and the experiment and the engineering and the technology, it's just sort of a mind-blowingly difficult challenge to bring it all.
Okay, so you needed someone with high managerial skills and people skills.
Yeah, and I think you need someone who understands the science.
Yeah.
Because the worst thing in the world is when you have non-scientists who don't appreciate the need for certain things. I mean, the way Los Alamos was set up, Oppenheimer knew how scientists work.
Yeah.
He knew how they come together. And without that culture, I don't think this would ever have come to be. But it's interesting to note, I believe that Oppenheimer's initial plan was something like, 20 or 30 people. It wasn't like however many they had. I don't know what the final number was. It was over 1,000.
Right.
I mean, that was not the original plan, but that was what it was requiring to get to the finish line.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Another thing I liked, which was almost, I was tickled by it. Each time it happened, I got tickled. In all those meetings that they're having are all these other scientists who are very famous scientists of the era, who have formulas named after them, who have accelerators named after them. And it was just was that E.O. Lawrence? Who was the guy working?
Lawrence from Lawrence Livermore.
Yeah, Lawrence Livermore Labs. And he built in his first cyclotron or whatever it was.
Yeah, in Berkeley. It's amazing. And it's also amazing to me that Oppenheimer got them to go. And that, to me, I mean, the film shows it, him talking and, getting the
convincing them. Yeah.
But wow, I mean, how do you get that many people to get up and leave their home, move into the middle of nowhere? What persuasive powers that must have required, to get people to do that? It's just, again, an amazing feat.
Mm-hmm. And what do you make of their persistent discussion about the difference between fission and fusion? I didn't remember that to be a big issue at the time. We all knew fusion would be another, right? Because you're fusing hydrogen into helium, completely different nuclear physics from fission, but they seem to make a big deal of it, and I don't remember that being an issue.
I don't know historically speaking, but I gather from a plot line, the reason was because Oppenheimer's less than enthusiastic position.
They needed to set that up.
Later, because he had Edward Teller, who then testifies later on in the committee that ultimately revokes the Oppenheimer security clearance.
And they shook each other's hands. You saw that?
Yeah, they did. But
that was no, but that was. I mean,
but where did Teller? Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with all that. But part of the
his wife didn't. You shook his head.
Right. But Teller was gung-ho on the hydrogen bomb, and Oppenheimer was less so because he thought it would divert resources from the atomic weaponry, which he actually was quite a fan of because he viewed this as a means of now having some mutually assured destruction that might cause peace to prevail. And the hydrogen bomb was not where he wanted the resources to go. But I guess in order to set that up, they wanted us as an audience to know that there's a difference between the fission bombs that Oppenheimer developed and the fusion.
Right. It's not just another nuke. Right.
Not just another nuke. Yeah.
Right. And because when they shook hands, I thought Oppenheimer respected Teller's reasoning
Yeah.
about he would revoke it. And I thought it takes two scientists to do that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, most other
Really
people would break out in fisticuffs, but if it's deeply reasoned, then the argument is sound. It's not a matter of what your preference is. This is the argument, and I got to go with the argument.
Yeah. And I think there's also a deep level of respect that underlies these relationships, because this is rarefied physics knowledge.
Yeah.
I mean, to be able to do quantum calculations and to be able to really understand the details of how these devices work, not many people ever get to that level.
Right.
And sort of it's a small club, and entry into that club is all coming from up here. And I think that yields this basic level of respect, even if you differ on critical issues.
Here's a question I had for you. I had not appreciated until I saw the film how shortly after the development of quantum mechanics, people had to make these quantum mechanical calculations. Right now, we are in the centennial decade of the discovery of the major tenets of quantum mechanics were the 1920s. And there you have the 30s, and right into the 15 years later, they're manipulating all the quantum equations to make calculations.
Yeah.
How could you just put me in that moment? Was quantum physics so thoroughly believed and trusted that people just walked flat-footed into this and made the bomb with it? I mean, is that how? Or were there people saying, I mean, it was Einstein. Einstein said God does not play dice with the universe. This was his indictment of quantum physics.
Yeah, but I think that's a good starting point for discussing it, because Einstein also said that he believed that quantum mechanics was a correct theory, but something told him that there was a deeper description yet to be found.
Okay, so not that it was wrong. Not that it was wrong.
Okay. Yeah, and again, Einstein, as you know, his Nobel Prize was for the photoelectric effect, which was one of the first achievements of a quantum perspective.
Yeah.
And so ever since 1926, 27, the basic equations are written down, Schrodinger's equations or Heisenberg's matrix mechanics formulation, they're equivalent. And so things have been in place for a decade, and triumph over triumph in these quantum equations, led people to a great confidence that, maybe Einstein's right, maybe there's a deeper understanding, but we don't need
that. You don't need, just shut up and calculate.
Yes. And then, not all of the equations that are underlying the development of the bomb are quantum calculations. There's a whole engineering side of things.
Yeah, I thought I don't think they gave enough credit to the engineers in this.
Yeah.
In the film. Somebody's got to build it, and the physicist is not building it. The theoretical physicist doesn't know which end is up.
Yeah, that's what leaves me in awe. I mean, I understand how those bomb designs work. Little boy, fat man, it was all conceptually clear to me.
Yes.
But if you, even today in 2023, gave me a big laboratory and told me to build one of these things, I don't know what I would do.
You'd light it with a hammer and a screwdriver, and you wouldn't know what.
I'd have to hire a whole group, and again be just looking at them from a distance, because I just don't.
Arms crossed. Okay, I'll do it like it.
Exactly. I always have dreamed that one day I should take an experimental course, even given by my colleagues here at Columbia. So I'd really get my hands dirty
with some street cred. Get some street cred.
Exactly.
But like I said, when I was being tickled by all those names, everybody has a Nobel Prize for some, and they're just casual names bandied about in the salon and in the coffee lounge and everywhere else.
Yeah.
One last thing. I thought they made an interesting distinction about his brand of communism, right? And it was they gave a lot of attention to this topic with his brother and his wife and his friends and his donations of money to causes. And specifically, the movie makes no mention of McCarthy in the Senate. Okay.
There's a moment where we see him, right?
You might see him, but we never at any time are told McCarthy needs to
Right.
interrogate you. And I think it's because, this is my reading onto this, that he was above McCarthy's pay grade. Okay? McCarthy is digging out movie stars and people, and here's someone who is, winning wars for us, right? And so my sense was, you don't want him mixed. Yes, there was a Red Scare, yes, but the McCarthy variant of that was very pedestrian relative to what was going on at his level in the government. That's how I viewed that. But also, what kind of, are you Karl Marx communist, or do you just want the worker to have dignity? There's the ways to slice this.
Totally.
And my sense was, when they said, do you agree? I forgot the exact scripting here, but he said, yeah, there's some things they do that I resonate with, not everything.
Yeah.
Right. And if you try to always, are you with us or you're against us? Yeah, then you get McCarthyism. But if you trust that not all answers are binary in this way, then you're allowed to be nuanced and think of Oppenheimer not as some traitor, but as a patriot who has his own conscience.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, you mentioned your dad before. I grew up, my dad was very much in the spirit of Oppenheimer vis-a-vis his views on communism, and that was a tough position to.
Was he part of just that huge community of the Jews who were totally into the communist cause?
Absolutely. He was one step away from the Rosenbergs, and he was very close friends with the people who ultimately adopted the Rosenberg kids. So it was a very difficult time to hold a nuanced view, but you're absolutely right. The world is not made up of black, white answers to most of these very fundamental questions. It's somewhere in the gray place in between.
Just a quick aside to that.
Yeah.
The civil rights movement, as it manifested in the 1960s, was brilliantly conceived because, remember, a big part of that movement was, once again, dignity and first voting rights and housing rights, but also the dignity of honest pay for a day's work to get you out of poverty.
Yeah.
That is centerline to the communist movement. And what they said was, we can't have communists leading this movement at a time when we're fighting communists in the world. So, and communists are godless, right? Because in the 50s, we put God on the money and God on the back wall of the Senate and God in the Pledge of Allegiance, right? God didn't used to be there before the 1950s. Originally, to one nation under God, indivisible. That totally breaks up that sentence. It was one nation, indivisible, with liberty. That was the original wording.
I did not know that.
It makes complete sense. One nation, indivisible. They flew in under God to demonstrate that we are God-fearing and communists have no God. All right. Point is, if you get Martin Luther King, a preacher, to lead a civil rights movement, he can speak to the rights of the workers without anybody thinking he's communist because he praises Jesus.
Right.
Right? So whatever communism the brand was at the time, it enabled you to still talk about workers' rights without being shuttled away into the communist ghetto, which is what that was.
Yeah. No, I thought they handled that well.
Yeah, so 2 thumbs up for our movie review, is it?
I give it 2 thumbs up.
Yeah, and so next we'll talk about Barbie. We'll get you back on.
Absolutely.
All right, Brian, nice chatting with you about
talking to you.
Christopher Nolan. I think it's a contender for multiple Academy Awards, including
without
a doubt. All right. This has been a StarTalk conversation with my friend and colleague, theoretical physicist Brian Greene, all about Oppenheimer and the bomb. Until next time, keep looking up. This is StarTalk Sports Edition. Today, we're going to talk about weed. Yeah, I said it. Marijuana and what effect that has, does, should, shouldn't have in sports. And I got Gary O'Reilly with me. Gary.
Hey, Neil.
All right. Ex footballer. Football as in soccer, I guess. I have to say.
Round ball.
Round balls. And Chuck.
Yes.
Always good to have you, dude.
Yeah, ex-weed smoker. Ex-weed smoker and current weed smoker. So there you have it.
And future.
There you have it. Just right. And future weed smoker. So yeah, okay.
So what we've got here today is, other than Chuck having been a former weed smoker and possibly future one, we don't have particular expertise in what role any of this plays in athletic competition. So we searched our Rolodex, and we came back to one of our previous guests. It's Stacy Gruber. Stacy, welcome back to Star Talk.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, you're one of the world's experts on what marijuana does to the brain, to our thoughts, to our decisions, to our abilities. And let me just get your full title here: Director of Cognitive and Clinical Neuroimaging at the McLean Hospital's Brain Imaging Center. And you're an associate professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. So you got all the right stuff here. And your research includes neurocognitive models and multimodal brain imaging. Ooh, and the best part here is you're assessing risk factors of substance abuse and the psychopathology of it all. Did I get that right?
You left out one thing, Neil.
What?
My hero.
Oh, okay.
You left that part out.
Okay, Chuck's.
The only thing I would tell you is we started the MIND program, Marijuana Investigations for Neuroscientific Discovery, or MIND.
Oh, I see what you did there. Very good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was really no data up till very recently on the long-term effects of cannabis when people use it for medical purposes as opposed to recreational or adult use. Really important distinction and factors into our talk today for sure.
Very excellent. So we'll get right to it. Many of us think about cannabis as a recreational drug and with very little sort of side effects to it from what's intended. And also medicinal use has been around for millennia, as I understand it.
Thousands of years.
Yeah, thousands of years. And so let me ask you, let's get straight into this because this is Star Talk Sports Edition. And Sha'Carri Richardson's Olympic ban, all right? She was the 100-meter sprinter that was tested positive for cannabis. And and so she got booted from the Olympics. She's not in her key event in the Olympics because she tested positive for cannabis. So I have to ask and start off this segment. In what way does smoking weed increase your musculoskeletal reaction time and make you run faster? In what way does it enhance your performance in the 100-meter dash?
It's a fantastic question. And I'll tell you, most people say things like, hey, if you could smoke weed or use cannabis and perform and win, you should get something for it because you're
two medals.
Two medals.
That's what you should get 2 medals.
Right. That's exactly right. And to your point, cannabis has been around for thousands and thousands of years. First documented use was as medicine, and it was part of our pharmacopoeia since 1850. We prescribed it. Then it became illegal through a series of events that I know Chuck knows.
You know doggone well I know it.
Exactly right.
They just let Chuck out of jail, out of prison. he just got out. Okay.
The mid-'90s saw us revisit this, and California was the first state to legalize cannabis for medical purposes. But in terms of sports, the WADA, the World Anti-Doping Association, has cannabis on the list of prohibited substances. And there's been a lot about this, especially with regard to Sha'Carri Richardson. And I think you have to meet 2 of 3 criteria to be on that list. It poses risk to your athletes. It provides a performance.
Health risk.
I think the language is pretty open and vague. That's part of the concern here.
Risk.
Right?
Okay. I risk winning the sport. Okay. Go on. There's a risk for you.
There you go. And it violates the spirit of the sport, which is one of those catch-all caveats that anything can fall under. But to your point, most studies to date document that one does not have improved, let's say, or faster reaction time or improved or increased coordination. Quite the opposite when we're talking about what we think of as typical, conventional, recreational, or adult use cannabis. That's not what we see. Individual constituents might confer some benefit, but when we're talking about flower, whole plant products typically used for adult or recreational purposes to change one's current state of being, we don't see improvements in reaction time. That's not what we see from a research perspective. And most of the science that leads us back to where we are now in terms of it being prohibited is a little bit questionable. And I think a lot of people are now taking a much closer look at exactly why it's on the list.
Wow. Yeah. So does this have anything to do? I mean, I don't want to get into the whole history of weed, but, and Reefer Madness and why that happened and, being connected to
Reefer
jazz.
Madness, the public service film
Right,
that was
the
produced.
public service film. And going up before that is the connection between Black people and white people coming together. Believe it or not, that was the problem. Forget all that. 2020, I believe, they removed it from Schedule 1, or I don't know if they actually removed it or did they take a vote, but I read about it sometime. So can you tell me about that?
And what is Schedule 1? Just to put us on the same page there.
Great series of questions. So just a real quick history thing, again, to your point, it was part of our pharmacopoeia. Reefer Madness really refers to a period of time in which the nation really fell under this spell. And there are a lot of psychosocial reasons that this happened. We won't get into it, but it fell out of favor. The Marijuana Tax Act made cannabis illegal. And it not only was removed from the pharmacopoeia, which doctors use to prescribe, not recommend or suggest, prescribe, it became illegal. In the 1970 Controlled Substance Act, it was placed in the most restrictive class, Schedule 1. Schedule 1, which by definition, gentlemen, no accepted medical value. Okay? Right. That's where cannabis sits today. Chuck, to your point.
Sitting right next to other drugs like what?
Cocaine.
Heroin. No, cocaine Schedule 2, sir.
Oh, okay.
Chuck, did I ask you the question?
I don't know. I was just thinking about cocaine.
I'm not going to go there. That's fine.
Okay, so Schedule 1. Who's to its left and who's to its right in Schedule 1?
So cannabis sits in Schedule 1 alongside things like heroin. LSD. So no accepted medical value, which people have, of course, begun to question because individual constituents from the plant. This plant is complicated. There's over 400 compounds. 100 of these interact with our brain and body system of chemicals and receptors. The question is, if there's no accepted medical value, how is it that you have an FDA-approved medication like Epidiolex, a single extracted purified compound for kids with pediatric onset seizure disorders that's not only FDA approved, but not in Schedule 1. So Schedule 1, by definition, most restrictive class. And to your point, Chuck, cannabis remains illegal at the federal level. In 2018, you're thinking of the Hemp Act. 2018, yes. The Hemp Act was passed, which basically said that all cultivars or chemovars, all plants basically of cannabis sativa L, that had less than 0.3% THC.
THC, yeah.
The primary intoxicating constituent of the plant is what gets you high. It's what our recreational or adult users are typically looking for. Every plant that had less than 0.3% THC by weight was okay. It's industrial hemp. So it's a really interesting shift that we've had because this is the proliferation that we've seen of CBD high products, products high in CBD that may or may not have THC up to a certain point.
The IOC, which banned Sha'Carri Richardson, where are they getting their information from? Are they getting it from, who's it, WADA? What is the acronym?
I think it's the World Anti-Doping Association.
Thank you.
World Anti-Doping Agency.
Are they getting their insights from the World Anti-Doping Association, and are they getting it from outdated federal legislation? I mean, who's minding the store here?
Yeah, it's another really great question. So the question is, where does this science, where does the sort of evidence for this come from? And most people are turning back to some studies that happened in a review paper that was published in 2011, I think, and they lean into it pretty hard. And that was enough evidence to sort of maintain its current status. Whether or not it should remain there is something different. Again, I would say this. If we know that people who, let's just think of people who smoke or vape cannabis for fun or recreational purposes, is their reaction time faster? No. Is their coordination better? No. Okay, so take that for a second.
Do they even want to run in the race? No.
Is there a competition where you can sit on the couch and eat donuts?
But not everybody uses the same types of products, right? And so here's the big distinction. So when people think of things like that, and they ask the question, should this or should this not be prohibited? Is it performance enhancing? Actually, from that perspective, no. But some people have raised the following question. Well, it relaxes people. It allows you to let things go. It's great for anxiety. Again, very low doses of THC, good for anxiety. Higher doses, not so much. Don't go there. Other constituents are great for that too. But if that's the case, if it's an indirect effect that we're seeing, it's not the same as a steroid, which allows you to build muscle significantly faster and with less effort, right?
With an elite athlete, and we kind of bounce back into the Sha'Carri Richardson scenario here, what difference would there be for them to consume THC as opposed to CBD? I know each individual athletes will react differently. I appreciate that much. But in a broad stroke, could you explain that to us, Doctor?
And just to be clear, THC is tetrahydrocannabis. Is that what that stands for?
It stands for delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, and it is the primary intoxicating constituent of the plant. Again, lots of players here. The other big player, the other big player here that people have spent a lot of time and attention on is cannabidiol, or CBD, a primary non-intoxicating constituent of the plant, often touted for its therapeutic potential. So when we think about what could happen if you are exposed to large amounts of THC versus CBD, what you typically find is CBD, again, is not intoxicating. People use it for all sorts of reasons. There is very scant evidence here from a scientific perspective. As a neuroscientist, we like to have empirically sound data.
Evidence matters.
Evidence matters, man. Exactly. And here policy has outpaced science. So we want to be very clear about what these constituents do and don't do. And we don't know the whole thing yet. We really don't. It's a complex story, especially when we start thinking about multi-compound products, not just THC or just CBD, but the ways in which people typically use, right? Like Sha'Carri Richardson. So to your point, Gary, what do we expect? Again, products that are higher in THC typically are used for those who are looking for, from a recreational perspective, looking to change their current state of being or sort of take themselves out of something. CBD is not intoxicating. Would you find that somebody has any physiologic change after using CBD? There have been some preclinical studies suggesting that, and there's some human studies suggesting it, but the evidence is pretty sparse. We have to do a lot more work in this area.
All right, listen, when we come back after this short break, what we really want to get to the bottom of is how is it that these chemicals that all extracted from weed can be banned or not banned, yet there's all manner of other chemicals that we take that do influence us physiologically that just get completely overlooked. Like, for example, ibuprofen to get rid of pain, or even coffee. So when we come back, we're going to see how does everything else we do and ingest measure up to cannabis on Star Talk. We're back, Star Talk, Sports Edition. We're talking about cannabis, marijuana, and what role it can play, has played, should or shouldn't play in athletic competition. And we've got Dr. Stacy Gruber, not her first rodeo with us here on Star Talk. This time we're just really trying to find out what's going on in the Olympics. How is it that Sha'Carri Richardson got banned? And but more importantly, for this segment, Stacy, I want to know, how is it that I can take sort of a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug?
NSAID. Mm-hmm. Yep.
NSAID. Okay, you got an acronym for that. Non-steroid anti-inflammatory to NSAID.
NSAID. Yep.
NSAID. And the Olympics, and they'll find that in my pee or however they measure it, and all is fine. Okay, but if I took a cannabinoid, that's bad. Don't they have similar effects on our bodies? And what's going on there?
So, they really, again, these rules, these regulations, these guidelines, I think are set in place sometimes in the absence of clear evidence. And in the case of an NSAID, which is very clearly used as an analgesic or a pain reliever, which also helps with inflammation, these are actually two things that people often use cannabis for. You happen to raise a really good point. NSAIDs are legal, and they are not, again, sort of on the illicit substance. They're not in the controlled substance group, and they're not in the CSA at all. So could someone make an argument that NSAIDs could themselves be performance enhancing because they help reduce inflammation or help with pain? Sure. Cannabis or marijuana, I think, is prohibited for a number of reasons. And they did change the amount of cannabis, quote, it's actually a metabolite of THC that's detected in the urine. They raised the limit of detection from, I think, 15 nanograms to 150 because people are using whole plant full spectrum products that are primarily comprised of CBD and other non-intoxicating constituents. But you may still test positive for THC. So
wait, nanogram? That's a billionth of a gram. Yes. Nanogram.
Nice to have your own personal astrophysicist who knows the lexicon. Right?
Did I hear that right? That's, oh my gosh. Okay.
You did.
That means they're really getting into your pee at that level. I'm just saying. If they know nanogram contents in my pee, damn.
It's in a bottle first, Neil.
Okay.
So, doctor, right. So here I am. I've gone into the lab and I'm being creative, and I come up with a drug that's A, a stimulant. B, if I test it on mice, could be proven to improve muscle growth. And if I mix it with water, it's rich in antioxidants. Would WADA ban this drug?
Great question.
WADA, again, the
World Anti-Doping Agency.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm not sure what criteria they use. Because,
okay, what if I called it coffee?
right, exactly. I could make the same argument for so many things. It's, again, I have a feeling, and I could be wrong because I don't live in the WADA sort of bubble or the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, but I have a feeling this has a lot to do with the fact that cannabis remains Schedule 1 at the federal level.
That's what I was wondering.
Remember
because if somebody thinks it's bad, then you don't want to be the one who says it's not bad, right? Maybe that they're afraid to be the first out of the gate on that.
And I think that there have been some studies that have perhaps prematurely or perhaps without a huge amount of evidence behind it decided that it can in fact help people with their performance. So therefore it must be a performance enhancing substance. That has really come under a fair amount of scrutiny these days. And again, when you do a comparison between cannabis and other substances like alcohol is not on the banned list.
Right.
So
it sounds to me like WADA really should be, what are you talking about?
What are you talking
Or what are you out of your mind? Like that kind of is what WADA is. That's not.
What the are you saying? What?
So, doctor, we kind of immediately default to an impairment of cognitive skills on using cannabis or marijuana. But are there, and I do believe the term that you use is downstream effects of cannabis use that could be seen as an aid to performance? Performance not being I run faster, jump higher, but in recovery. I maybe aid sleep, have an anti-inflammatory property. Sure. Do we have those downstream effects from this drug?
Yeah, and why not ban sleep? Because getting sleep enhances your performance.
It's the best thing you can do for your performance.
It's the best thing you can do actually across the board almost for anything.
Right. So we should ban it because it enhances performance, I think.
I think to your point, again, there's a difference between direct and indirect effects. And how do you start to measure what will or won't have an effect downstream? So some of these constituents have certainly been shown to be anti-inflammatory and help promote sleep, help reduce anxiety. Could those at some level help someone function day to day? Remember that athletic performance is also an extension of how that individual is in a given day. This young lady was quite brave and quite open and honest and told the world why she used it. And I think most people had a rather visceral response like, I get that. She also knew what the stated sort of guidelines were and did it anyway. The point is, who's to say what is and isn't going to have a downstream effect? We know that exposure to cannabis or certain cannabinoids when an individual is very young can result in some decrements. Absolutely true. Sure. That's not necessarily the case for individuals as they get older. And we've had some evidence to sort of contradict what we've seen in the recreational consumers. But again, the story is pretty unclear here.
Well, how about this? There's some people, as we know, who have sort of genetic inability to process alcohol.
Yes.
In ways that others do.
Yes.
Are there genetic variations in people's reactions to the cannabinoids or whatever?
Cannabinoids. Yes, absolutely.
So, and can I just dovetail on Neil's question? Can you, as you answered that, tell us about cannabinoid receptors in our brain? Because I've read somewhere that it's the only so-called drug, the THC being the psychoactive constituent, it's the only drug that actually our brain is already designed to latch on to.
I've heard that.
I heard that too.
I've heard that a lot. People say I'm wired for weed. Quick primer. You have CB1 and CB2 receptors. They're part of the endocannabinoid system, a system of chemicals and receptors throughout the brain and the body. THC binds pretty effectively to CB1 receptors, for example. We also have things like mu and kappa receptors that are, again, are endogenous, but they are the targets for opioids. So, it's not just cannabis. But But to your point, the cytochrome P450 enzyme system in your liver basically dictates how you process things. And again, really great point. Genetically, we are not all created equally. We're just not. And there are some groups that don't process alcohol, right? Some cultures, Ashkenazi Jews, for example, we don't have a ton of alcohol dehydrogenase, the thing that breaks down alcohol and allows us to process it effectively. So there are many people who are poor metabolizers of THC. And as a result, they are often very, very high for a very long time. These are the people that you hear that say things like, "Oh my God, I was out of my mind for 12 to 14 hours." There are other people who metabolize so effectively and so efficiently, they can have 30, 40, 50 milligrams of a product and these edibles, and they don't show an effect. So we are not all created equally, and your genetic profile, your makeup actually really will dictate how you process these products.
But I look at your list of 3 criteria, right? Does it, or was it the IOC's criteria? Does it have the potential to enhance WADA? In New York City, WATER is pronounced water. So it's hard for me to have this conversation.
WADA, water.
With water. I need a cup of water.
I need a glass of water. Yeah, give me water. Glass of water. Yeah.
It's a very New York City accent. But so these 3 criteria, does it have the potential to enhance performance? Is there a health risk? And does it violate the spirit of the sport? And I think coffee, you can put a check in all 3 of those boxes for coffee. And so marijuana and other drugs also apparently, but they're outlawed.
Yeah. It's a huge disparity, I think, and one that people are really looking at much more closely now. And again, I think, the other things, you have to have 2 of the 3 criteria. One is it violates the spirit of the sport. One is it poses risk to the athlete. And 3, not in this order, it enhances athletic performance.
The spirit of the sport is, I want to be as best as I possibly can be. That's the spirit of this. Faster, higher, stronger. That's the whole freaking point.
Yeah, it's the mantra.
Don't get me started on this. Damn.
Absolutely right.
I thought the spirit of the sport was, I don't care if I win or lose if I smoke this weed.
It's a new thing.
That's the new Olympic motto. I'm going to smoke this weed and not give a damn.
No, here's what you do. No, you put a couch instead of that flying rolling camera along the 100 meters. And you sit on the couch and watch other people race while you smoke.
There you go. Different kind of Olympics, for sure. Right.
Stacey, before we take a break, what about the sports where you can't be excited and pent up for it because you need the stability of precision, such as in the pistol shooting or in archery? Can we say that cannabis enhances your performance because it settles your physiology in a way that doesn't make you nervous and then miss your target?
I would actually take the opposite perspective, which is that cannabis isn't one thing and it doesn't have one effect for all people, right? Some chemovars or cultivars or products are actually in some ways stimulating for people and they feel more energized. They feel the term is euphorogenic. I want to make, I want to do, I think we talked about this once before. So that wouldn't necessarily, sort of support the point of settling. It would actually sort of go against when people feel really blah or down, they often use a little cannabis that might be a product or a strain or a chemovar that influences or increases their energy. So that would argue against that. Not all products are the same. Not all people are the same. And the ways that you use these products absolutely dictates the outcome.
Okay, so the takeaway is weed is highly chemically complex and you can't generalize its effects as a product without thinking more precisely about the biochemistry of each of the molecules.
That's exactly right. It's not one thing, and it shouldn't be. One size does not fit all here.
Yeah, but to my point, if there's some sports where you need to be calm relative to other sports where you need to be up, the same drug could help you in one and harm you in another, your performance.
I think that would be true across multiple classes, yes.
Okay. So enhanced performance doesn't always mean faster, higher, stronger. It can mean more laid back. That's all I'm trying to get.
Right. And again, direct versus indirect effects, right? So yeah.
Exactly. We got to take a quick break, but when we come back, more with Stacey Gruber, our marijuana expert up at the Harvard Medical School. And we're going to see what the future of sports legislation looks like in the face of new science or not on Star Talk. We're back. Third and final segment for Star Talk Sports Edition, all about marijuana in sports. And of course, we can't do this without the singular expert out there who thinks about this, who measures people's brains, who has all the fluency necessary to settle these arguments. Dr. Stacy Gruber. Again, welcome back, Stacy. And continuing our deep dive into this, what is going to happen with the future of sports legislation in the face of your research, or more broadly, research into the chemistry that might help us perform, but if not, it might help us recover from injury for having attempted to perform?
Great question. And I wish I knew more about how these agencies made their decisions. In terms of the scientific literature, it is constantly evolving. Every day we have new reports, right, on different constituents or different approaches to addressing different symptoms or conditions using cannabis for medical purposes. How does that dovetail with our elite athletes and what they may or may not be using it for? Should there be a distinction in terms of what they're using and how? I think a lot of people are very interested in this, and for good reason. It's important to be up to date and to let science guide the policies, and to allow people to live the way that they live and to understand if certain things are very comparable. It's really difficult for people to understand why one thing would be banned and another would not.
Is there a comprehensive study that's done or being done that lets us know exactly how cannabis will affect us?
I think there are lots of different studies that are currently underway that look at different aspects, but part of the problem is that cannabis remains illegal at the federal level. So doing research, depending on the type of research questions you want to ask, is not as easy as you think. And when we're talking about anything that is a cannabis chemovar or cultivar and its effect on whether it's athletic performance or all sorts of things, there's stuff that we know and there's an awful lot that we don't know. The question will be, where does the intersection of some kind of benefit versus some kind of performance enhancement get made? I think that's a bigger question.
So in 2020, Neil, the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, and hockey all said no suspension if you test positive for cannabis out of season. Now, in season, they said you get a fine. Now, they obviously have moved away from the WADA cannabinoids, bad, not happening, you're banned. So they must be using some kind of research, some kind of
somebody's plugged
data
into them.
Yes.
Yes.
So we are at an elite professional level saying, that's cool, but, if we're going to stick you on the naughty step with a big fine, but with WADA, it's an outright ban. So there seems to be a lag between what's happening here in the US and globally for WADA. And I think there might be a reason, but I'd like to hear what the doctor's thinking is.
And if it's NFL, NBA, MLB, and NFL, that's the whole kit and the caboodle right there. Yeah. Especially the caboodle. It's all in there.
Yeah. A highly technical term, the caboodle.
That's right.
Don't forget the caboodle. I think it's a great point. And I think that, again, there is a sort of a philosophy and an approach to this. Remember that cannabidiol, or CBD, is not prohibited, but they changed the lower limit of detection from, I think it was 15 nanograms per mil to 150 for exactly this reason, I believe, to make sure that they were only looking for what they considered current use, as in right before competition. How that gets determined, is a pretty slippery slope, I think. And to your point, Gary, it's a very, very important distinction when we talk about global versus more local decisions that are being made here in the United States. Absolutely.
But and so I would say, though, no, I might conjecture that part of this is due to the fact that we have decriminalized marijuana on a state level pretty much everywhere, not to mention the however many I don't know if it's 13 or 19 the last I checked, states that say, yo, man, you can go ahead and do this. So I think the removing of...
Is that what the legislation says? I didn't...
No, man. That's the way I read it. I read it as, hey, Chuck, go ahead.
Go ahead.
But I think when you strip it from the penal code, that... you allow people to say okay, and you allow sports organizations to say, hey, if this is not illegal, if it is not like a class felony or whatever it was, it's not criminal, then who are we to say like you can't do it?
Well, so what really should be happening here, at the risk of being Captain Obvious, is governmental legislation should actually lead the scientific enlightenment on this, and then let the official sports organizations follow. If you're going to have sports organizations allowing it, but in principle, they could have allowed it decades ago.
Right.
If the science was there, Stacey, if municipal federal legislation is at the core of this that everyone then reacts to, what access do you have to the writing of laws and members of Congress? And shouldn't you have a seat at the table there?
I think a lot of us are trying to have a seat, and I don't know that that's really the only pivotal point here. I think there are multiple points that are critical. I think when you are involved in the conversation, you have a better chance of seeing things done comprehensively in a way that is centrist, that makes sense, that isn't motivated by other, let's just say, agenda items. I think it's very, very important. It's important to have
the emphasis on centrist, right? I mean, there's a point where you can land that is scientifically reasonable and sensible. Yeah.
Let science be your guide. There is truth in science, right? We know that. And not everybody believes that, but I think there is truth in science. And if you allow science and...
You don't think there is, you know there is, and we all know there is.
If you allow...
You don't have to have soft vocabulary on this show, okay?
If you allow the science...
Thank you.
To take its place and allow decisions to be based on evidence and not rhetoric or other things.
Politics.
I think it's a different landscape. It's a terribly difficult landscape to navigate with regard to cannabis in this country and across the globe, but especially in this country with the discord between federal and state regulations, and it's created a lot of confusion.
If we think the problem lies with WADA, not water, WADA, World Anti-Doping Agency, the clue may be in the first of those words, world, because as Chuck's highlighted, cannabis is pretty legal in just about every state. Yeah. But world hasn't all come to that conclusion yet. There are countries around the world where marijuana is illegal. And so they have a problem that is so multifaceted, they are not probably able to solve it in one
so they have
simple
to be
move.
Because they are international, they need some international sensitivities.
Right.
They can't all be in Stacey's lab. That's what we're saying here.
Oh, that's a very good point, Gary. I didn't even consider that. So I have the answer. We must get the leaders of that country high.
Why didn't I think of that?
Diplomatic solution. I love it,
Chuck. The next UN General Council, I will be there. What's up, y'all?
Handing out.
There you go.
Oh man, the next UN General Meeting is going to be held in a park across the street.
Wait, if you got them all high, that would end all war. There'd be more solved by that.
Instead of things like a G20 summit, you could ask for an OG20 summit.
Yo,
right?
nice. And it wouldn't be OG20, it'd be OG420. What?
That's right.
We just solved world peace here.
There you go.
Yeah.
Dang.
Yes, people need to get on board for sure, and at least come together and review what we know, what we don't know, and then whatever we don't know, we should address specific empirically sound research studies to help clarify.
Because Stacey, I say this because I've been invited to various committees and commissions that serve Washington interests, and because I have expertise that they value. And so it's not a weird thing for someone with expertise to be brought into the room. Sure. And so I'm going to vote you into Congress. How about that? And it'll be on the weed ticket.
It's a green ballot. I have testified at Congress previously, and I very often contributed. And I continue to do that in lots of different ways. I'm happy to continue that. And you're right.
So forgive me for even thinking that had not already happened.
No. So. But to your point, we really need a little bit more science and a little less rhetoric to help guide the discussions, both in this country and across the globe.
Well, I think Chuck solved that.
That's right.
So I think part of the problem is, regardless of what Congress does, there are influential politicians who might think one way or another about it, and they have their followers who just do what they say, right?
Even our president, who I think has done a great job in shepherding us through this COVID crisis.
Thinking about the science.
He's let the science lead him. Mm-hmm. He is adamantly opposed to marijuana being decriminalized on a federal level.
Because he's the reefer madness generation.
Yep.
That's why.
Yep.
That's why.
I just love the term reefer madness.
So are we still in the wake of the war on drugs? And we're waiting to get out of that wash to find
because that spills into sports into sports committees. Yes.
I think a lot of folks, again, are taking a much closer look these days. But again, there is the Office of National Drug Control Policy, and the ideas and sort of scientific evidence that allow people to make good, sound decisions needs to be up to date, and it needs to be read and understood.
What a concept.
Yeah, tell me about it. Yeah. Wow. Can we just extend that?
What a novel idea.
Can we just extend that to everything that we do? It's just everything that we do. Let me ask this, though, because I know we're running short on time.
Yeah, we're running really short.
I know we're running really short. I have seen people get very upset and heated in this debate, and they talk about the fact that marijuana is indeed addictive. And the reason why it should not be allowed for use.
Or it's a gateway, drug.
Right,
well.
because that you can become addicted to it, and that it is indeed a gateway, and all of those things, those tropes that we've heard. Can you just talk about it? I don't care if it's true or not. Just from a scientific.
What does that mean, Chuck? You mean answer whether or not it's true? What the hell kind of?
It's a giant essay type question. I don't care whether it's true or not, but can you talk about it?
That's exactly right. So, compare and contrast.
Really quickly, two schools of thought. Is cannabis or marijuana addictive? There are certainly people who wind up with what we call cannabis use disorder. In the old days, we would call it abuse versus dependence. Now we have a new term, cannabis use disorder. And the numbers of individuals who use cannabis who wind up with cannabis use disorder vary depending on the study that you're looking at. And it's really important to keep in mind that you have to actually meet the people who are using the cannabis and talk to them about their use, as opposed to just assuming that because they use daily, they must have a use disorder, first and foremost. Number two, gateway phenomenon, gateway hypothesis, gateway theory. The use of cannabis will obviously lead to the use of harder drugs because people who use cannabis or people who use heroin often used cannabis first. That doesn't mean that the use of cannabis led to heroin use. In terms of the receptors in your brain, again, these things get quote, turned on in terms of exposure to certain substances like drugs or sugar or sex or all sorts of things. So the gateway hypothesis is one that I think most people have sort of let go of at this point. There's not really great evidence suggesting that one leads to another. Is there an overlap in those who use let's say, quote, harder drugs who have used cannabis? Sure. And why is that? Usually that's more a factor of their sort of psychosocial experiences and people who are...
Or just practicality. If my first drug is probably not going to be heroin, okay? It's going to be some other drug. So B implies A, but A does not give you B, right? In that case.
Sort of the transitive property, A equals B, B equals C, so A equals C, but not in this case necessarily.
Not in this case.
I don't think that there's a huge amount of support for it. Absolutely clear cannabis leads to the use of harder drugs. I don't think that that's really been well proven.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, guys, we got to end it there. This has been wonderful, Stacey, to have you back on.
Pleasure.
And this conversation is not going to end here. You know it.
Right. All right.
The marijuana is with us to stay. And it's going to show up in all kinds of ways. And you don't just have insights on sports, you have insights into all facets of society where marijuana could manifest and all of its chemical derivatives. So anyhow, I just want to thank you for being on Star Talk again.
Thanks for having me.
And Gary, Chuck, always good to have you here as my
pleasure,
co-host.
Neil. Thank you.
Always a pleasure.
All right, this has been Star Talk Sports Edition, all about cannabis in sports. I'm Neil deGrasse Tyson, as always, bidding you to keep looking up.